Good to see you wearing your Wanderers blue today.
Steady on. I should have worn green. I should have worn green.
Rabs, how you going?
Caney, absolutely fantastic to see you.
Mate, for all the Rabs fans out there, we've been rushing down to Patio World ads.
Well, you've got to make a living somehow, don't you? Well, a good mate of mine, Charlie Trailer, who I have a drink with every now and then at the Lowlands Bowling Club, says, Rabs, you are absolutely getting rid of the English language. Don't you know it's Patio World? So, but Patio World, Jason and everyone out there are fantastic, and they're a good bunch. And Greg Sellers, who I worked with at NBN for many, many years, and Ross Hartley, they are the production team, and Greg manages Patio World, so that's all a bit of fun.
You had a lot of gigs on the side, didn't you? You know, in regards to presenting, emceeing and stuff like that. Do you still do that now and then?
Yeah, little bits and pieces. So, and most of that through the 30 years at NBN was a lot of charity stuff. So, and I felt it was our right to have to do that and be part of the community and commit to the community. You're on air, you were seen to be someone out there and easily recognisable. So if a charity put its hand up and said, Rabs, are you able to come and MC? 9 times out of 10 I'd say yes, if time permitted. So all of that was a great deal of fun, but very rewarding at the same time. So these days, yes, I still do a fair bit of charity work, but there's a little bit of work that I do that's non-charity. It's my financial pleasure. So,
well, I was going to say that too. I mean, like a lot of stuff you would have done for free, but comparing, that's a lot of work in preparation, isn't it? A lot of people don't realise how much work goes into getting up and preparing.
And I think more so if you have got to be the front man and run it specifically. If there is a run sheet and it's all timed out and scripted and whatever the case, that's very, very easy to do. Like I do some work with the Master Builders Association, which I've been doing for probably 25 years, and now I do their regional awards as well. But Andrea and Luke and everyone, it's all scripted. So all you need to do is turn up. We have a little bit of a rehearsal at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Bang, do the show. It's all over by 9:45. So those sort of things are very, very easy to do. But when you've got to be in part of the organising committee as well as doing the emceeing, then it becomes a little bit more of a bigger task than it normally is.
So I take it you would have got the Master Builders Association to oversee the Patio World patio that went into the backyard?
Well, in actual fact, we had Jason out not long ago saying, look, we've got an old heritage home in Hamilton South and a Federation home, and he said, with the patio, he said, we can do it. He said, but you'd have to extend that. So all of a sudden, when we went past $100,000, it became a non-go. But they do a great job, and they, as I said, they're great people.
Well, I was going to say, too, with all the work you've done, you received an OAM a few years back. I just got a little blurb that was on the NBN website I looked up, and you said, I'm a little bit shocked, a little bit dumbfounded. There are many more people in the community that are much more deserving of this award than me. It has certainly come as a surprise. If I ever find out who actually nominated me, you're in a bit of strife. Who was it and what happened?
They are. Well, both of them, in actual fact, received OAMs themselves. One was Cliffy Marsh, and I think the round mound of sound, not Gary Harley, but the other round mound of sound, the man who ate most of Derby Street, Richard Jones. I think he might have been involved. But the main catalyst, and was a very, very good friend, and he involved in the advertising industry for many, many years, was Andrew Robertson. And he was with Peach Advertising for many years and had his own heat marketing company. So I think Andrew was one of the main catalysts, and for that I'm forever grateful. And in reading out that statement, and I still firmly believe that what I've said there is I believe in 100%, because you take the people that volunteer for the Westpac Rescue Helicopter Service and they go to barbecues and they sell raffle tickets and whatever the case, the people that look after foster parents and those people that have had 20 or 30 foster kids and whatever the case, never get the recognition that some old geezer in grey hair, well, probably in those days wasn't grey hair, it might have been a touch here and there, gets himself on television and all of a sudden does a little bit of work here and there and gets recognised. And I think there are many more people deserving of the award than I was.
I think you're being too...
Oh, no, I believe that, Mike. I really do. And yes, I have done, and I acknowledge the fact that, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity of being able to receive that. And I must admit, I've only worn it twice, and I get Tim Owen kicks me in the bottom every time he said, "Where's your badge? You wear it at a function or whatever." And I feel a little bit embarrassed to wear it. But
The reason I say that is that because again, you hold the place together when it's happening. So you're an important cog in that. And funny enough, I was speaking to a fellow by the name of Max Markson, the celebrity of the stars, absolute lunatic. And he mentioned something. He said he goes, "I think I should get an OAM." And I said, "Why would you get an OAM for?" He goes, "Well, who puts all this together?" He said, "End of the day, I wouldn't be getting those celebrities to come to those charities if it wasn't for me." And I thought,
well, there is another side of that, because Max is getting in this one. So sure enough, he's getting these blokes to turn up to be the guest speaker. And I think Max has done an amazing job. Okay, he didn't invent the Mars bar, so that was Harry M. Miller. So, but no, Max has done an amazing thing.
Well, Max is coming on in a few weeks, so can't wait for that one. What do you do? You just sort of mentioned just briefly then about the bowling club. What you're doing right now. You're getting into lawn bowls and you've ditched the golf sticks.
Yeah, no, and golf's one of those great games. It is a game that you play yourself. Okay, you might have some competitors in match play or whatever the case, but every day you go out there and strike that little white mongrel of a thing, you're playing yourself. And that little white mongrel of a thing wasn't doing the right thing. So I kind of fell out of love of golf for a little while. And I know good friends of mine, Murray McHugh and Alan Cox, they're all shitty that I haven't turned up to golf. But I tried my hand. We have a drink at Lowlands Bowling Club every now and then. And everyone was out there rolling up on a Thursday. And they said, "Why don't you come out and have a roll up?" And we did. And there was Greg Smith and myself and a couple of others. And all of a sudden we said, "Oh, we might join as full bowling members." And then we play in galas and whatever the case. So I really enjoy it. It's a good atmosphere, and you're playing with other people, so you're not trying to let them down. So you're either playing in pairs or triples or fours. And so it's a good fun. And ironically, in all the commentary, I ended up doing 2 Commonwealth Games as the lawn bowls commentator. So
you did too. You did too. A bit of controversy at most bowling clubs. You don't use the cheat stick, do you?
No. In actual fact, I've got a bit of a theory on that too. The bowling stick.
I think there is a method to that too. It's not easy to.
It's not easy to do, but it keeps so many people in bowls. So a lot of the older people can't bend down to be able to pick their ball. They've got a thing that they can lift their bowl up and bowl, but they can't bend down to bowl it. And with most bowling greens, whether it's synthetic or grass, you can do a fair bit of damage if you let the bowl go from the hip. Mm-hmm. So the bowling stick, or the bowling arm as they call it, it's been a great invention. And they have their own national championships now. We've been recently in contact with the USA lawn bowls. Their Open is coming up in November of this year, and we were thinking about getting a team together to go over and play. And that was one of the first questions we asked. Is the bowling arm permissible to be able to be in the US Open Lawn Bowls Championship? Not a problem. Yeah. So it just keeps so many people in bowls. Yeah. But it is, because they don't miss. They just don't miss.
The Lowlands Bowling Club, it's a well-run club. Is it Brett Gemmell still there?
Brett Gemmell's the bowls coordinator, and Michelle is the CEO. And 2 weekends ago, they had one of our bar staff, Sarah, 23 years of age, a mother of one, a little one who's just turned 2, stage 4 breast cancer, and it's also in her spine. So they had a fundraiser at Lowies. It's gone from 11 o'clock in the morning until we had to shut it off at about 4:15, 4:45 to do again. They raised $64,000 for Sarah on the day. It was just absolutely amazing. Brett ran a bowls competition. So if you got beaten in the first round, you could pay money to buy your way back into the tournament. That went all day. It was absolutely fantastic. And all the bowlers, there was some prize money at the end. They gave all that back to the Sarah Foundation. Yeah. So it was just absolutely amazing. So that's the camaraderie of Lowlands.
When are we going to beat cancer? Honestly,
yeah.
I mean, I've someone very close to me that had breast cancer, and and I was going into when she was getting chemo, and it's like a conveyor belt. You're sitting there going, God, like there was none of this back in the day.
No.
It's like we must be eating something. There must be something we're doing that's causing this. But it's almost like so the one place is getting a lot of money. These pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Then you have a look at the other scenario of Mark Hughes, and the Mark Hughes Foundation. It's absolutely incredible what Hughes done, and the prognosis for Mark isn't that flash as far as longevity is concerned. And I don't think I'm speaking out of school there. I think everyone knows that, and Mark certainly does, and he's very positive and Curly and everyone. They do an incredible job. And if anyone's going to break the cycle of being able to find a cure for something, I reckon Mark Hughes and the Hughes Foundation are well on the way to be able to find out what's happening with brain cancer.
Someone told me that you were driving buses for a while.
Still am.
You still am?
They call me Stan. Reg Varney.
It's not like on the buses, is it?
It is, absolutely on the buses.
I'll get you, Butler.
So it's premium bus services, and this is a commercial scenario. So premium bus services, Mike and Michelle Hadaway own the business, and so I did, and Richard Hammett was part of the business. This is going back 4 or 5 years ago, and he said, Rabs, would you do something for our Facebook page? I said, yeah, no. So I did that, and then he said, how's retirement? I said, I'm bored to buggery. And he said, you want to do a shift every now and then? So I said, oh, doing what? He said, what you just spoke about. You know all about the business now. I said, okay, if you short of a driver sing out. So I went and got my L licence so I could drive up to a 24-seater. But they're ringing far too often. Wow. They're ringing far too often. So they've also got a great contract. The new innovation centre at the John Hunter Hospital is being built at the moment. Yep. And they've got something like 1,200 tradies. They park down at McDonald Jones Stadium, and we've got a shuttle service that runs up and back. So I do that shift every now and then. But I get a bit of stick from all these soccer lunatics who get on and say, you never did any soccer in your day when you're on MBN.
Don't worry, I get that. I get that too. You know who else is a bus driver? And you know him. Remember the big goalkeeper, Bob Catlin?
Oh, Bob Catlin.
Used to play for the Breakers, Marconi, for the Socceroos. Yeah. He was posting every lunchtime. He has these big meals he lives on the Northern Beaches, big slabs of steak. He's like a cut, like half a cow, and Bob, polish it off, schnitzels. So I sent him a message. He says, mate, what are you doing? He says, oh, this is my break. I said, what do you mean? He goes, I do a split shift. I said, what do you do? So I'm a bus driver. He goes, I drive a bus from the Northern Beaches down to George Street every day. Come back, then I have 4 hours off. Do it all again in the afternoon. He says,
fantastic.
He says, I'm making more coin than I ever did as a professional soccer player.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't say that premium bus services pay me more than I was at MBN, but maybe I was being overpaid at MBN.
That would affect your pension, wouldn't it?
Well, I can't get one of those jolly things. I only want $1. That's all I need. So,
Look, mate, you came to Newcastle in 1980 from Adelaide.
Yeah, via Sydney. I was born and bred in the southeast of South Australia, born in a little place called Narracoorte, but we had a property at Lucendale. And then Dad sold that property and we moved in between Narracoorte and Penola. So Penola became my school, St. Mary MacKillop. I went to St. Joseph's Primary School in Penola. Went to Adelaide, Sacred Heart College in Adelaide, then came back to Mount Gambier. And ironically, my first ever job in 1969 was with SES Channel 8 in Mount Gambier, the TV station, working in the traffic department. Now, that wasn't in the car park saying you park here and you park there. It was when the commercials come into the station, I had to allocate them airtime. And then once that campaign had finished, send them back to Unilever or wherever they were. Went to Adelaide. I wanted to play footy. That was my big goal. Came from a very, very sporting family. Mum and Dad were great sports people. And
AFL?
AFL, yeah. So played with Port Adelaide under 19, but I was working. So the stint at SES Channel 8 only lasted 6 months. And Rick Allett, who was with Pete Marwick Mitchell, which are now KPMG, he was in Mount Gambier and he said, well, come on, I can get you a transfer to Pete Marwick Mitchell in Adelaide and we can see where you go from there. And I signed with Port Adelaide under 19s. That didn't last that long. And they asked for a young bloke at work to be a clerk in Darwin. So I thought, well, 19, I'll name down. Sure enough, I was the only applicant and got the gig. So I went to Darwin where I got called up for national service.
Wow.
So I got called up and spent a great time. When I went in, it was 2 years.
Yep.
While I was in rookies, it went to 18 months. And then when Goff got in, I only had 7 days to go. So, but it was a great time. And one of the great things of national service, and if someone asked me to do it again, I wouldn't hesitate. I would just go straight there. And I wish some of our kids now had to go through what we went through because it opened the eyes of so many people. Young kids went in there at 19 years of age. Had no real direction in life. Now, I had a job that I could go back to. If I wanted to go back to Pete Marwick, that was guaranteed. The young blokes came in, didn't have a job, but they had some direction by the time they'd finished national service, whether that was in administration, whether it's in Armoured Corps, whether it's in mechanics, whether it was bakery or whatever the case. They were given some direction, and the discipline that provided by the Army in those days was absolutely fantastic.
But how do you think kids these days would would go. It's a totally different world, isn't it?
Totally different world, but it'd be a great exercise to take.
There's a reality show.
Absolutely. To take some not necessarily troubled kids, but kids from all diverse backgrounds, from educated kids right through to kids who do struggle, to be able to put them in a system, even for 6 months, male and female, and see how it all works out, to see whether there is a change of attitude, a change of discipline, and a change of direction for the kids. And I think it'll be something very, very worthwhile. But went back to Adelaide and joined Philip Morris Cigarette Company. As Lee Moore, the great NBN sportscaster, used to say, I was a purveyor of drugs.
I bet you were with that cigarette company. I bet you had plenty of friends back then.
You've got no idea. I won't say that's how I got into NBN, but there might have had something to do with it.
Just staying with that, though, you mentioned once, I was working in the newsroom and there was a guy working in the vent up the top of the air conditioning vent. And he was changing it. It was black. It was thick, like charcoal. I said, Rabs, what is it so black? And he said, Caney, it's from all the smoking from over the years. He said, because we had ashtrays next to our typewriters, he said, this plume of smoke, we couldn't see one end of the, it was like the Bermuda Triangle.
Well, you've been in that NBN newsroom for many, many years. And those big windows that had the Venetians in them, they actually opened. So if you pushed them hard enough, they would swivel. And in the earthquake, they actually moved out of their sockets and moved back in when that earthquake struck. But in the afternoon, at about 4 o'clock, you had to open the windows. You couldn't see the news desk. So everyone would be having a durry and they're typing on it. And you had the old typewriter, 2 fingers, no backing paper or whatever the case. You were just typing away and the smoke would be going here. But it all got done. But it was just a den of iniquity.
Just staying on what you mentioned about the earthquake, that was a day, wasn't it? Especially in that newsroom.
Well, even the week, that day specifically, I'll never forget, Jimmy Sullivan was having a day off. Now, Jimmy was our news editor. Well, he's come in and he's wearing a pair of Don Dunstan shorts. Now, they were tighter than Warwick Cappers, let me tell you. So, and everyone's just dropped everything because everyone's in a state of shock. We all had to go out onto the lawn and we could see all the dust and everything. Yeah. We thought that like everyone, BHP had blown up or whatever the case. Yeah. And then we found out about the Workers' Club. But then it was just news time.
Yeah.
Well,
here we go.
For Newcastle, with at least 9 people confirmed dead in an earthquake. A full series of reports in this special edition of NBN News. Good evening, I'm John Church.
And good evening from Tracy Reed.
Newcastle is a city in shock tonight following a devastating earthquake that's left at least 9 people dead and injured about 100 others. The quake, registering 5.6 on the Richter scale, hit the city and surrounding suburbs at 10:30 this morning. And tragically, Newcastle became the first Australian city to have a fatal earthquake. This is how NBN news crews covered the horror hours that followed.
Minutes before 10:30 this morning, Thursday, the 28th of December, became a day etched in Hunter history. The quake struck without warning, savagely cutting short our everyday activities, including an interview at the Hamilton bus depot just kilometres from the epicentre.
Terrible. Oh.
The concrete paving rolled in 10-centimetre waves, bewildered bus drivers standing in awe for minutes afterwards.
I mean, it would have been a hard day to put a sports segment together.
Yeah, we did.
It was almost like that would have been the ray of light at the end of it.
Jim said, you won't be needed for a week. Basically, see you later. I said, well, surely there's something I can do. So we had a couple of spare news cars. So the Channel 9 journos came up and I actually drove around and were able to open a few barriers to be able to get in areas, to be able to get Channel 9 journos at the epicentre of where it was all happening and whatever the case. So I basically became a driver for those 5 or 6 or 7 days after that. But everyone chipped in, running copy or whatever the case. So Johnny Church, who was on that bulletin with Tracy Reed, he actually did a live cross to the USA. From it was out in front of the Workers' Club, in actual fact. So they did a great job. And again, it was one of those spur of the moment things that you had to get out there and work in every journo that worked on that. To their credit, they were absolutely fantastic.
It would have been, because when it first happened, I mean, they didn't know whether it was a bomb going off. They didn't know what it was. They was trying to ascertain that it was actually an earthquake first and foremost. and then stuff happening everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And I must admit, there was a quote as it was happening. When we felt it in the newsroom. We're on the first floor of NBN. And it was every man and dog for himself, let me tell you. There was no chivalry. But
Were you under the table?
The door was, and I heard the one quote like the mayor of Hiroshima. What the so-and-so was that, you know, and that kind of summed it up. Everyone went outside and we just waited for everything to happen. And the news came through. One thing that a lot of people did was ring their immediate family saying we're okay, which I think was absolutely fantastic because then communications kind of shut down. But it was just such an eerie time, and everyone's got their story of where they were and what happened at that particular time. And I remember New Year's Eve going up Layman Street, and people were sitting out in the middle of the road with a little card table and chairs, and it was the quietest, eeriest thing because Newcastle city centre itself was shut down. It was just incredible. But the resilience of Novocastrians to be able to rebuild from that earthquake, and of course the death toll went from 9 to 13.
Yeah,
it's absolutely amazing. And
the Workers' Club.
Yeah, the Workers' Club. That's and I must admit I frequent that a little bit now. The next every Sunday afternoon we go in for the raffles and watch the footy. So,
but getting off that, I mean, getting back to when you first come to NBN, like for someone who loves sport, it would have been like a kid going into a candy store.
Yeah.
And the names, David Fordham, Darryl Eastlake,
there's some funny stories.
Silver Fox, but it was a good stepping stone for a lot of them too, wasn't it?
Oh, there's no doubt about that. NBN was treated really as a training hub for anyone that had serious ability, and I never had serious ability, to be able to go onto the big smoke. And many have taken that path. And Channel 9 used to send a couple up. Eastlake was the first one to come up and to ply his trade here. He came from radio on 2GO. Darryl could not get 25 minutes of the first game he ever called, Curry and Cessnock. And Reg Davis, and he took his headphones off at one stage and threw them on the desk. He said, I can't do this.
Wow.
18 months later, he's calling State of Origin. So, it's absolutely incredible. It was how I got into it was it's really quite an accident's happened for a purpose, I think. Terry Musgrave was the secretary, and I was involved in tennis, and I was here with a lady who was a very, very good tennis player, my fiancée at that stage, Diane, and we're involved in tennis. And Terry Musgrave rang me at home on Monday night and said, you're on television next Sunday. I said, what are you talking about? He said, Hura Herman. We had an old Sunday sports show, which covered all local sports, and they also did racing and Controversy Corner with Lee Morn and Johnny Young and Mick Carlin. And Hura Herman, who was a barrister in town, actually did every fortnight a tennis segment on local tennis. So I said, you serious? He said, yeah, we think you could do it. So what do I do? He said, I'll ring this chap by the name of Reg Davis. Now, I'd met Reg and Dasher and a couple of others prior because being that purveyor of drugs, we'd released a new cigarette in town called G&G, and I don't know whether I'm allowed to say that, but anyway. And we put up $500 for some needle matches. So Cessnock played Curry, so winner take all 500. Now, this is going back to 1980. So, 1981. So, and I had to go and put some signs strategically, but I'd go into the OB truck, the outside broadcast van, and say, where can I put these signs? So I'd met Reg a couple of times. So he said, ring Reg. I rang Reg and I said, what do I do? He said, prepare me 5 minutes of notes on local tennis. So like a school kid, I sat home and timed it all and did 5 minutes of notes. I got to the studio on the Sunday morning and he said, nice to meet you again. Yeah, good to see you. He said, do you know Peter Taylor? I said, yeah, Pete runs the McDonald's Junior Coaching Clinic right throughout the Hunter Valley. He said, good, you're interviewing him. I said, hang on, Woo. I've never been on television before and you want me to interview someone? He said, yeah, just get on there and just talk tennis. Well, what do I do with these notes? He just took them off me, ripped them up and put them in the bin. So that was my first entree into television, was talking to Peter Taylor about tennis. So it kind of came a little bit naturally. I totally forgot about the cameras. And then Warren Cantello was the floor manager, and he's doing this one. I've got no idea what that was. Then he's going like this. David Fordham was the host, so he kind of took over and said, you've done well. So then Reg came down and he said, oh, that was very, very good. He said, would you like to come back next week? So that's how it started. And then in the October of 81, David went on holidays, and I was asked to read the news for 3 weeks. Then in January of 82, they had a thought in the back of their mind that they would start a Wide World of Sport type program called Sports Centre 3.
Yep.
and they asked me to go full time and host that with the Silver Fox. So
think
purely
there's
by accident, I ever got involved in television.
There's a bloopers tape somewhere regarding that
It-
show.
it
It
was-
was almost like
and
this is live television, but tell you what,
Eastlake-
it was
Eastlake
pretty
was on that.
fucking loose.
So Eastlake was on that program. I was away somewhere. So and we do the racing. We do the daily double from Randwick or Rose Hill. So Fox goes, well, a very good win by Emancipation today. Emancipation paid $420 and $150, and second horse Pride of Jenny or blah blah blah. And gulp. Here it is.
And it was for the 3-year-old fillies over 1,400 metres. The numbers 4, 13 and 7.
The Silver Fox was NBN's weekend sports show racing expert, and he was usually on the money with his opinions and race summaries until a horse called Gelsomino came along.
Number 13, what is it? Gelosimo. No. Gelosimo. $1.10. And the Newcastle horse, homemade, paid $2.40.
I couldn't get it out, and once you do falter a bit, it's very hard to sort of get going.
It was live television, and it was the greatest thing in 30 years of television to do was live television. Now, this was 4 hours of live television we did on a Saturday. Then we'd back up and do the Sunday morning sports show. It was just great fun. Eastlake was beside himself.
Win-throw handicap. Pardon me. And it was over 1,100 metres. But Carrioy Star, the Regal Carrioy paid $1.50.
If this happened today, you'd be called into the GM's office.
In race 4, 3, 1 and 2.
The worst part of it, once you start to laugh, you couldn't stop. So they had to go to a commercial break or whatever the case. So.
I think we got one of you.
Trench Digger.
Quietly.
Oh, yeah.
We should get all
Well, I've been
this
asked a
over
couple
with.
of things about
Trench Digger
most
paid
embarrassing
$1.30
moments, and you've probably got it.
No.
The STC Cup. I'm having a terrible time here. The numbers were 6, 7 and 2. Lordship, $2.20 and $1
He used to
even.
go big on the races. He had the daily doubles and stuff like that.
He was, and he's still with us, and he lives in Adamstown, and Fox is 88 now, and he's a real character. So he's one of the great survivors.
He's more than grey now.
Absolutely. He'd been in the racing industry for many, many years before he joined NBN, and a few times the constabulary might have tapped him on the shoulder. I'm not saying that he was an SP boogie, but he might have been. But a great character. And he'd have the races on all day.
Yeah.
And then at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, he'd turn the radio off, and we'd all go, "Oh, thank goodness for that! Thank goodness for that!" But he was a real character. This is Lee Moore. Lee Moore won the blooper of the year for about 3 years in a row. Not for this one, but for a couple of others.
But I mean,
This is Rockin' Butler. Now, this is Johnny Gilmore.
Also used to do a bit of the races. I used to do the races. Gary Harley used to do the dogs.
Straight to Beaumont Park for race 6. The Lamford Stake, Jock Haddock and the Red Rug the favourite. Yeah, this isn't a race at all. They've got the races mixed up. That's Star Rumour in front. This is race 7. What are we doing now?
This is how loose it was. There was no
race 6 was the
scripting
Lamford
anything.
Stake. Jock Haddock was the favourite at 10 to 9 on. We're going to try and to get this on for you in a moment. Perce Fletcher, his trainer from down at Tawoom Bay, has this dog going great guns at the moment. His form is first class.
Cameraman walked in. I think that was Mark Husband.
So he's going too strong in front.
I thought it was the
starting
gardener.
at double figure odds. Pano's Boy was the winner, 10 to 1, another 3, 5 to 1, and wholesale 5 to 2.
You used to do that. You used to do that.
Fair dinkum.
Just when you couldn't be put off anymore, let's put some friggin' barking
next
dogs in the
Saturday
back.
afternoon.
Well, David Fordham used to get the whoopee cushion. Johnny Bird.
Oh,
Yes, I got a bit upset with that Arthur with those dogs there. I didn't know what was going on. Did Harold Park? Come on, Arthur, cut it.
Olympic gold medalist
here we
Michelle
go.
Ford has served notice that she is ready to resume her title as our top woman swimmer. Michelle she easily won her heat in the 200 metres butterfly at the Australian Winter Championships today,
But
beating
you're thinking
arch
on the
rival
go.
Tracy
But
Wickes.
Murray Finlay said it was the first time he'd ever heard a person give up on a word.
But-
And he said, but you recovered very well and
but some
continued
people
on.
don't recover because when you make a mistake, especially when it's live, a couple of seconds feels like 10 seconds.
Absolutely. It
feels
feels like an eternity.
And what happens? You go back and you look at the tapes after it and go, "Oh my God, I don't want to look at this." And you go, "Not too bad."
And
it feels worse when it's happened.
Absolutely. And you wouldn't want to know every script that had sport and they could put in effortlessly, all the journos would put that in for me.
I mean, great times. And you mentioned it was a stepping stone. Did Channel 9 tap you on the shoulder?
No one ever rang and said, Rabs, why don't you come down and sit down?
Would you have?
I don't know. I was firmly, Di and I kind of parted ways at the end of 83 and it was a little bit of an interesting time because it was all wonderful right up until then. Not outside the fact that our relationship broke up, but NBN were going through a transition period, a massive transition period, because Kevin Parry from Western Australia had come in and bought the company. And he brought with him a general manager, Joe Sweeney. And Joe's job was to clean the place up a little bit, if you know, putting it nicely. So there was a great parting of the ways with many employees. And I think there were 54 employees went the first year. The sport department basically was dissolved. And I was told that I didn't have a job on air, that you can go into the sales department. So I went into the sales department in 84 and then managed Colourtran, which was a photo finishing business, which we had in 85. And then I thought, no, I'm out of here. And I'd lost the job that I really treasured most of all. And I, at that stage, I thought I was improving. I hadn't called anything at that particular stage, any rugby league. I'd done some sideline stuff, but hadn't got into any of the calling. Went out in a real estate business with a good mate of mine, Peter Price, and that lasted 18 months, and we still remain great friends to this day. And then in 87, when the Knights got in, Lee Morn then chose to go, and rightfully named the father of the Knights, chose to go and be the marketing manager of the Newcastle Knights as a full-time job and give up NBN. So Jim Sullivan rang and he said, look, would you mind coming back and reading the news a couple of nights a week? And I said, look, love to. And no pressure. And that stage, AutoQ had been invented. Back in the old days of 82 and 83, we were reading cold, hard script. So AutoQ had been invented, and I don't know whether you have it, but the great Lee Morn faux pas was one of the first AutoQs.
We'll try and get it.
But I'll tell you the story, and it's the AutoQ was a little bit like this table, but half the width, and it was a conveyor belt, and the camera came down from up top, and the scripts went along this conveyor belt. One of the girls would be here with the scripts, and she'd put the scripts out, whatever the case, and they'd dive off into a bin once the script was read. So this Saturday night, Helen Hughes was reading the news, and Lee was doing the sport. So, and as you got the little box up here to tell you what the story's going to be, and it's a story on Sir Lawrence Olivier. So, and Helen throws to Lee one story too early. So it's Sir Lawrence Olivier. So, well, it's not my go anyway, but I might as well read Sir Lawrence Olivier. Now, at this stage, the script's in the bin. So she started to put out the sports script. So Lee thought, well, he'll have a stab in the dark. Sir Lawrence Olivier died today. The AutoQ operator had gone around, got the script out of the bin, put it back there, and he read the rest of the script, which said he spent the day quietly at home with family and friends. It was his 80th birthday.
You know,
it's classic. And he won the blooper for 3 years in a row.
Do you know something that was actually a little bit more serious than this? I did 3 months before I came to NBN. I did a couple of casual shifts with NBN. I got offered a job at Prime 7 Wagga. And there was a guy called Doug Hogan. Now, Doug Hogan was sort of like the Ray Deneen of Wagga. He was on sides of buses. Everyone knew who Doug Hogan was. And he had a real style about him. Couldn't get away with it at Channel 9. But when you're in the country, you talk like the locals. This is what he was always saying. You don't talk to someone, you talk like we're in the pub.
Yep.
So instead of, a man was caught doing 160 kilometres an hour in an 80 zone, a man was doing 160 clicks in an 80 zone. And people loved it.
Yeah.
But you couldn't get away with that at Channel 9. So anyway, long story short, there was a man that was pretty famous in Wagga. He was quite ill in hospital, and someone gave him some information. So he's more or less announced Joe Bloggs has passed away today in Wagga Hospital. To the family and friends. And then quickly he got a note at the end of the bulletin saying, "Not dead." So he actually went out after the, because there's always tapes of the news. He went out and destroyed every tape that was possibly made. So it never happened.
No. Well, I nearly got caught. Johnny King ran me. I had a little radio program on 2HD for many, many years, which was just local sport. Johnny King ran me, the great St. George winger, rang one morning. He said, Eddie's died. So he was referring to the great Eddie Lumsden. Yeah. I said, you're kidding. And I was about to go like this, and I thought, no, I better check. So I rang Eddie's house, and Eddie answered the phone. I said, Kingy's just rung up and said, you're dead. He said, I've been out mowing the lawn. So, I was so close to going, breaking news on 2HD, Eddie Lumsden's passed away.
But that's a good point too, is that back then we'd always check. There was an old journalist at Channel 10. His name was Charles Christian.
Yeah,
He used to be a 9, he came to 10, and he was a lovely old man. He was one of those guys that was a stickler for the rules, stickler for it. Like he'd always check scripts, and whatever he did, he could have went home half an hour earlier. He'd sit there and read everyone's script and go, "Oh, Caney, you've said this, you've pronounced this wrong in your package." Oh, thanks for that. He was just that overseer.
But he'd do it in a nice way. He wouldn't rant and rave at you.
And a little bit more with him. When he was at Channel 9, he used to do the overnight shift for the Today Show.
Yep.
Most people would come in at 3 a.m. in the morning, have a look at the tape, see what happened, the US Open golf, and he'd spiel through it and cobble something together. No, he'd get Channel 9 at 8 o'clock the night before and watch every shot.
Yeah, yep.
He knew everything, and he would do that even at Channel 10, where if he wasn't doing the golf package, he'd go, Tiger Woods chipped in on the 14th. It'll probably be at the 2-hour mark.
And know it. Yep.
But these days, there's a lot of mistakes happening in the media.
Well, there's not the fact checking. I think that now that there was, and going back to those days when Charles was there, and we used to host all those programs in and out, even at NBN. Or we'd be doing the French Open and we'd be doing Wimbledon, and my job was a 15-second closer to throw back to normal. So you've been there all night watching or coming in towards the end to watch the tennis and do a 15-second closer. And no one was watching at that time of night unless it was the final. I remember remember the old show that you used to have how to host a dinner party or how to host a murder party? And dinner party.
Yes, yep.
Where I had to get dressed up in a tuxedo, so I went and did the hosting in the tux. Reg Davis was watching. He said, "Never ever do that again. Put your blazer on or whatever the case."
Well, there is a rumor that you used to get to the Green Roof Hotel before the news had actually finished.
Well, that's not a myth. That's actually true. And there was, God rest his soul, Steve Blizzard, and he used to sit at the front bar at the Green Roof and say, "Rabs is due," because in those days, and that Jeffrey was doing the weather. So this is before Gary Youngberry and well before Gavin Morris. So I didn't have to stay behind for what they call the 3-shot at the end. So now you've got Gavin, Tash and Adam or whoever's doing the sport sit there at the end and all three of them are on the show. So as soon as the sport was done, see you later. Makeup off. I'll tell you that story in a minute too. So makeup off and away you go. So that time, Nat hadn't finished his weather. I got every green light. Hadn't finished his weather. I walked in. They said, "Your segment's recorded. You cannot get here from the time you finish." I said, "I have." That was live. So that was a bit of a myth. But talk about makeup. My son Alex, now 34, in his year 1 at New Lambton Heights Primary School. The teacher went around the room and said, "All right, kids, what I'm going to do is ask you the first thing your dad does when he gets home from work." So she left Alex till last, and they said, "Okay, Alex Rabbitt, what's the first thing your dad does when he gets home from work?" He said, takes his makeup off. So she rang Sue and said, "Look, has your husband got a problem or whatever the case?" She had no idea what it was.
Mate, just staying with your face here, the mo.
Yeah.
When was the last time we ever saw a Mike Rabbitt without a mo?
1978. Wow. I was playing Dame Edna Everidge in a review at the Illawarra Tennis Club.
There you go.
And Todd Woodbridge was sitting on the roof of a car, his parents' car, because he wasn't allowed in the club. He was this high,
please, Dave,
watching it.
Dave, can we search this? Honestly, it's got to be somewhere.
Ask Todd. This is absolutely different. Sue's never seen me without a moustache. And my television career nearly only lasted one night. So initially I had the moustache like John Newcomb was way down.
Yeah.
like Maxi Walker.
Well, I was going to say, Nukes was insured, wasn't it?
13 million, I think. At one stage it was insured for. Mine's never about 3 and 6. But it was down here, and Murray Finlay called me in the morning after my first bulletin, and he said, "You're off air." I said, "Oh, why's that? I didn't make it blue." Or he said, "No." He said, "Nothing there." He said, "We've had a complaint from." I think they're now called the hearing impaired, or but in those days it was called the Deaf and Dumb Society. And I had no idea that the hearing impaired would sit there and try and read your lips and get their dose of the news.
Yeah.
And he said it's either got to go or it's got to be trimmed right back. So hence that's where it's been since 1981.
Wow. At Elk Architecture, we don't just design buildings, we shape the spaces where life happens. From concept to construction, our award-winning architects bring our vision to life with precision, passion, and purpose. Whether it's your dream home or your next big commercial project, trust Elk Architecture to build what matters most. Elk Architecture, designed for life, built for the future. Just getting back onto live sport, is you guys did so much live sport, and even sticking. We've been talking about tennis a little bit. There's a Newcastle Open. There was always the Fordtronic Resort.
Yeah, no, that was.
I think Ivan Lendl used to play in that.
Well, it was designed for Ivan to come and have a hit because Tony Roach was Fordtronic Resort, and it was actually Richard Gumley who owned 37 butcher shops in Sydney. It was basically his resort, but Roachy was there as his name, and just a lovely, lovely bloke, Tony Roach, and his wife Sue. And he laid a rebound ace court, which was when the Australian Open moved from Kooyong to where it is now. It was all rebound ace.
That's
before.
Could have been about late 88.
Yeah, I'm not 100% certain of the timing. But Ivan used to come out and we'd telecast at 10 o'clock in the morning because he'd go to Newcastle Golf Club and play golf for the rest of the day. He was on about 4 at that stage and loved his golf. So, and I think Martina played in one, but we didn't telecast Martina. But there were so many wonderful players that came out and we telecast that. And when I retired in the end of 2014, Sue and I sat down and we worked out that how many different sports I'd had the opportunity of actually working on a live broadcast. And it was something like 12 or 13.
We had basketball.
We had basketball, rugby league match of the day. You had the Falcons, you had the soccer.
KB United
in those days. We did water skiing, we did lawn bowls, we did show jumping, we did so many other things. Rugby league, and of course KB United.
Oh, how good was KB United?
You haven't got Roy Drinkwater's own goal, have you?
Oh, I tell you what, there's a story about Roy Drinkwater. They tell me that he's
well, his nickname was Donkey. If that's what you're getting at.
No. Apparently, he mysteriously left the country, owing a bit of
might have.
Don't ray me.
I think there's a bit of truth in the room. but ask Phil Dando. I don't know whether you've got it, but it's one of the most incredible own goals of all time.
Yes.
It was on the halfway, and Roy just turned around and tried to kick it back to Phil, and Phil just stood there and watched the ball go straight over his head in the back of the net.
That's right.
So, but they before my time in Newcastle, but they held the record for a long, long time. 19,500 people at the International Sports Centre. It was just crazy, and great action.
Graham Hayes. Was it Keith Harris?
Keith Harris.
Yep. Had to be Bunny Curran there.
Bunny Curran. Well, the great Bobby Charlton came out and played a couple of games for KB United. So and Craig Johnson.
That blows people's mind, doesn't it? Bobby Charlton. I actually got a picture there at home of him in the gold KB strip. Yeah. You remember, the gold strip, that was supposed to be a model of a KB can. But back then you couldn't get gold, so Canary Yellow had to friggin' do it.
Yeah. Well, I know KB went overseas and played in Indonesia somewhere, and David Fordham actually Singapore, and David went over and called that game.
Yeah. But I mean, great times. I mean, even the basketball, the Falcons. Although it was live calls, but it wasn't obviously going live. They played again, I think, the week after, but.
The rugby league grand finals were live.
So,
Lee got tied up in a couple of those. So and there's Lindsay Gaze is Edward Lee.
4 Had some early anxious moments. Playing against the new team in the National Basketball League, the Melbourne Tigers, the Kern Falcons stretched their winning tally to 10 with just 2 losses. It was a typical game for the Newcastle Falcons. They started comfortably enough, but found themselves behind at quarter time 24-19 and at half time 54-46, and they looked to be in some sort of trouble. But they started the third quarter in a totally different frame of mind and hit the Tigers like a lightning bolt with form like this. The session completely from the visitors, and it was really over at three-quarter time after the Falcons had rattled up 40 points in the quarter. Mike Johnson was in superb shooting form and took the Man of the Match award. The 2 Australian imports, Jeff Patterson and Frank Goldfinch, have proved to be ideal additions, and the Falcons are starting to look like championship prospects.
Clash with Coburg at the Sports Entertainment Centre.
That place was rocking.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I was the court announcer for 10 years, and that was 84. And it's a funny story on the 84. So Peter Moynihan was on the board, and I was the ground announcer. We had to go to Geelong, and they had to lose to Geelong by 16 points to miss the finals. So they didn't end up near the top. Brisbane were undefeated. So then they had to fly to Brisbane the next night and play Brisbane, who, as I said, were undefeated. So anyway, we're staying at the old Melbourne Motor Inn, and Dave Ankeny's the coach, and he says to the team, now, if we get beaten tonight, we've got to beat Brisbane tomorrow to get into the semis. So don't put too many beers in your bar fridge. So anyway, they win by 16 points. Brad Dalton loads up our cars, and we've just got all this grog and whatever the case. Anyway, we go into Ian Rebellion, who's number 8, and the first clip. So we go into his room and drink every bar fridge dry. So they're in the finals. So they run out of grog. So they ring reception, and everyone's listening. And Moose says, "What? $96 for a carton of grog and VB at that?" Mike Johnson pipes up. He said, "Moose, that's far too dear. Just get half a case."
That was 1984.
They went to Brisbane the next night, got beaten by 50, and terrorised every hostess on the trip home. Let me tell you,
I bet those cheer girls weren't safe either.
They were. It was absolutely fantastic. Mean Al Green came and at one stage down this end here is the big doors that go out.
Yep.
And my commentary table, or the announcers table, was near these doors that just had the handle pushed out. Mean Al Green was playing with the Adelaide 36ers at that stage. Well, he's come through and someone's giving him a bit of a nudge, and he's knocked the table and myself straight out the back doors and down these half a dozen concrete steps. So it wasn't much fun, but we had at the end of the bar here was the Tui's bar.
Yep.
And in those days when the game finished, everyone was able to go on the court. So all the kids and everyone, and it was just absolutely fantastic. And then we're into the Tui's bar.
It's sad we haven't still got a team in the NBL, isn't it? I mean, I know they're still going in the state league, but it's not the same.
Well, this is where it started. And there's a chap just there before. I just saw him. His name was Ian Davids on the other side. He topped the scoring in 2 Olympic Games for Australia. Now, this is before Australia became really a powerhouse in basketball. He was just one of the most pure shooters I've ever seen. Yeah. So, but again, they went through that situation. Illawarra are the only remaining foundation club in the National Basketball League, and they win the title this year, which is fantastic.
Yeah. And sadly, it's all about money, isn't it? You know,
correct.
Correct. I'm trying to think that there was had been the foundation coach for the Falcons. He went on and coached the Kings, and he was also one of the ones that
Bob Turner.
Bob Turner. That helped start
absolutely. And he would hand deliver a press release to every media outlet in Newcastle on the Monday morning. So he got to know the media. He really pushed basketball. That stadium only held 2,300 people, and it was packed every game that they played.
Yeah.
And then we had the great Ken Cole came and coached us, and that was an interesting period. Lindsay Gailey's brother coached North Melbourne. He got into a blue one night and took his team off the court. So there was dramas.
Remember Ken Cole used to turn up in a fur coat?
Fur coat and this big Texan hat.
And whatever was a cigar.
And whatever was in the Coca-Cola wasn't Coca-Cola, let me tell you.
That's right. That's right. He's had a colourful career, that dude. But yeah, I mean, basketball, we've had, some good success with, a pretty notable junior that's gone all the way to the NBA. But you look at some of the other sports. I mean, you got Craig Johnson done some great stuff. The Jets are still in that halfway stage at the moment, always struggling. Even with tennis, I mean, we had Peter Doohan, we had Rachel McQuillan, but no one's even playing tennis now.
No,
and the sad thing about that, the District Park,
and well before that, Steve Doherty was a great tennis player. So.
But you look at that District Park. Now they brought in that golf range out the front, which used to be the main court, the main set of courts. No one's out the back playing tennis. They're all swinging clubs, and golf has saved that club. It's incredible. And even when you used to walk around suburbs back in even the 80s, there was play courts, backyards. There was everywhere. Now it's valuable real estate.
Absolutely. And Di and I spent 3 months touring overseas, going back in 75, and that was a wonderful experience. You were basically living out the back of your car, playing tournaments. You could go over there. Now you've got to go to qualifying to get into qualifying. There's a Challenger Series to get into any sort of qualifying. Qualifiers win $20,000 for first round loser, whatever the case. So you would think there would be a proliferation of people playing tennis, but there's not. There's not the number of people playing. And yet you talk to some of the coaches and they say their coaching clinics are full. So I don't know where they're going. I speak to Dave Williams every now and then, from ex-manager of Tooheys. He plays 4 days a week at District Park. And he says his group are consistently there, but he doesn't see too many others from time to time.
And pickleball's even
Pickleball has taken over.
You don't have to run so far.
No, but you look at the...
That'd be perfect for you too.
Yeah, I wouldn't have picked up a racket for about 25 years. Pickleball, I had to go to the Newcastle basketball stadium, and they have converted some of their courts, which is pretty easy to do, and they play pickleball there, and it was absolutely packed, which is great to see. But getting back to what you said, in those days we did everything. And I mentioned show jumping. We did water skiing, which was Oz ski, which was tournament skiing. Motordrome, Peter Gerbiel and Ross Allen and the Allen family used to do the motordrome. Reverend Rossi Allen, Speedway with Chrissy Watson and whatever the case. So the diversification of sports that we were involved in was absolutely fantastic. I think towards when the Knights came in, that probably started to change a little bit. We still commentated and broadcast the Newcastle Rugby League Grand Final for a while, and we did a lot of the once aggregation came in 1991. We did the Grand Finals in a lot of the regional areas too, like Tamworth and Armidale and the Gold Coast and Coffs Harbour, and we did all those individual groups, the Central Coast as well. But then Fox started to come in, and it was kind of a in between what we did, the big boys taking over, to what there is now. So we did all this local production. Then Fox kind of came in, and I remember doing a Knights game in Canberra. We had 2 crews. We had 2 sideline cameras, so Fox and ourselves, and it was just an absolute S-fight. Then kind of Fox dominated, and then they said, well, gee, we need some content. So all of a sudden there has been this re-emergence, if you like, of every sport being called or shown and envisioned, whether it's bar TV or whatever the case, which I think is great.
Dave here, actually, he's one of those guys that goes out and films, the soccer and the AFL and
fantastic. And it's hopefully spawning some good commentators out there too, male and female. So it's giving kids a bit of a chance. Now, I kind of felt sorry for Mitch Hughes and even Adam Murray at the moment and the sports people at NBN. They kind of pigeonholed into the news, doing their stories, and they do a very, very good job, no doubt about that. But they didn't and don't have the opportunity that I did when I was at NBN for all those years, of being able to be involved in all those different sports. You had to have a little bit of a working knowledge of those sports. You didn't have to be an expert in those sports, but you had to have a rough idea of, and then do your homework. Like David Fordham was absolutely hell-bent on doing his homework for his individual sports. So it was a great journey.
Yeah, we've got actually Simon Hill coming up in a few weeks' time, and I know him very well, and you should see just the amount of preparation he just puts into one game. He's got sheets of paper everywhere.
And I think he's a great commentator. I really enjoy his commentary. He sounds very much like the great English soccer commentator.
Yeah. Sadly, he's the way football is in this country. It's almost like he's going back to England, because it's almost like if he stays here a little bit longer, opportunities might dissolve back home. So he's going now. He's a little bit disappointed too, just the way the A-League started to the way it is now. Australia winning the Asian Cup 2015, and now we struggle to get out of a qualifying group.
Yeah.
Like honestly, you hear all day talking about football. There's so many things to unpack there, but I suppose other sports are a little bit like that as well.
Yeah, I think so. And also, Mike, I think one of the great problems that we've got in Australia too is that we seem to lose a lot of our kids unless they are absolutely elite and have the desire to push through themselves with the help of their parents. But we seem to lose a lot of kids from that 15 to 18 bracket, that maybe child prodigies up to about 12, 13, and then other things start to creep in. The hormones might start to move a little bit, and they've played 10 years of footy up until the age of 12, and they want to go and do something else. Or so we're losing, and across all sports, netball, rugby league, Aussie rules, everything. There's a great quandary there for Australian sports, how they keep those people engaged in their sport. Now, whether it's that sport or they move to another sport. I know I spoke about Alex before. He moved from soccer to rugby when he was about 11. So he'd played quite a few years of soccer, and then thought, no, we'll try something else. So they went over to rugby. So that was a bit of a difference. So, I think we're in good shape. The Aussie rules, I think, are doing a sensational job right throughout Australia. The way that if you drive from Brisbane to Cairns, all you see is 4 posts.
Yep.
You don't see too many.
I was seeing that I was living in Balmain in Sydney when I was working at Channel 10, and there was school kids in the playground playing AFL, and I thought, this is in Balmain. This is like rugby league.
Yeah.
Heritage heartland. I mean, just across the road in Birchgrove, it's where the first game of rugby league was ever played.
But Balmain have always had a very, very strong Aussie rule side. I played a little bit when I was in national service in 1972 for North Shore. And when I first came back to Sydney in 77, I played for North Shore again. So it was quite a strong lead. And this is well before the Sydney Swans. So Balmain have always been one of the leading teams in that AFL competition in Sydney.
Just with, this is a little bit of a contentious issue that happened in Newcastle a few years ago. It was the Supercars. Were you a fan or not of them?
Oh, I don't mind the Supercars. I just think it was in the wrong spot.
Yeah. Where would you put it? But where?
Yeah, again, whether you build a purpose track or whatever the case, and if it could have been a monocoque because it should have gone around Shortland Esplanade. I thought all the way around, or you would have had to build giant mesh.
It was a great advertisement for the city, though, wasn't it?
No doubt about it. I just think the secret squirrels of how it was all put together. There were some questions to be asked there from council's perspective and Super League's perspective. I don't know whether Newcastle got the rub financially, as has been purported. You talk to Neil Slater and a lot of the publicans around the area, they didn't get the kickback that they thought they might have.
Well, exactly.
Super League bought, the Supercars bought in a lot of their own material, even bought their own ice-making machines and whatever the case.
Yeah.
So I think that was a little bit disappointing. Sue and I went a couple of times and absolutely loved it.
Yep.
It was fantastic.
Did you ever think that in your lifetime you would have seen a race around that going up Watt Street? I mean, that's incredible. I mean, some of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I think once the railway line had been truncated, then it was a chance.
Yeah, I mean, I was at Channel 10 when this was first started, the first race in Newcastle, and I was actually doing the story from Sydney, and I'm looking at these pictures, I was blowing my mind, and people, were coming up to me going, "Is that Newcastle?"
Yeah, yeah,
and they go, "We thought it was a dirty, shitty city with smog," and I said, "The BHP's gone." I said, "Look at this, going up Watt Street. This is the greatest bit. I love this bit."
280 they were up Watt Street.
Mate, it was like my Uber last week. Actually, I think that was.
But it was fantastic racing. And again, probably you think, well, could they pass there? But the crowds were just absolutely extraordinary. I ran into Steve Smythe from Queen's Wharf Hotel on the first race, and we were walking around. We ran into Smuts and we said, "How's it going?" He said, "I can't wait for the bank to open on Monday." So we had a good time. But I kind of think that, and there was all the hullabaloo about, and to the East Enders fought a good fight and eventually wore everyone down. But for you can't buy that sort of publicity. And I think on that first day, there was that first race, there was something like 16 shipping movements. That first race, so you can't buy that publicity. No, it was just absolutely magnificent.
You touched on council. You're not getting away with this. You're not getting away.
Robbo, rescue me.
2017, you went for council. Didn't get on.
I got. I think it was something like 1,700, 1,800 votes. Robbo got 200. I ran second to Robbo on his ticket. So all my votes went to Robbo, and Robbo gets in.
Yeah.
It didn't last terribly long. It's upset everyone. But I felt passionate about it at that particular stage. And I just wanted to go as a Newcastle Independent.
You've got plenty of time now.
Never again. In actual fact, it was the best race to ever run second in, let me tell you. Because it became a dysfunctional council. You had, when I say dysfunctional, that's probably been a little bit unfair. But you had a Labor-dominated council that no one else was going to get a look in. And they just lambasted the poor old Churchies and Kath Elliott and whatever the case for the next 4 years. So, and Robbo, until Robbo kind of...
But you've got to get rid of that party politics in council. Everyone independent.
Absolutely. And the way they're carrying on at the moment with Ross Gerridge, I think it's just absolutely disgraceful. Callum Paul, they're all playing politics, and that's all it is.
Well, just with that, I mean, they had this independent inquiry into everything that's going on in council, and it's sort of come back with a sort of like, everything's going okay. But also the letter writing, with the Craig Neelan and the Jeremy Bath situation. It was found out that, the Herald, obviously, the letter writing was going to the Herald. Wouldn't you think that this independent inquiry would have gave the Herald a call and said...
Without a shadow of a doubt.
What went on? Yeah, but nothing. It just seems...
And Donna Page's articles were absolutely to the point and very, very well written. You would think that an independent commission would say, well, hang on, there's all these letters that are going to the Herald. We've got to have a look at that and make a determination there. Now, this last report obviously hasn't done that either. So, and then there is this aspect of saying, well, the majority of submissions to this inquiry have come from outside of Newcastle. So I don't know how that happened. So get over it, get on with it, and start to run this city for the people of the city. The city has elected Ross Gerridge as their Lord Mayor. Give him a breather and let him work with the rest of the councillors to be able to do the right thing for this city, because otherwise we're going backward.
Would you have been a good mayor?
No, I don't think I would have had the smarts. In actual fact, I was asked. That's how all this campaign started, by a couple of notorieties in town who shall remain nameless, asked me to stand to run against Nua. I thought about it, and then I thought, no, I don't think I've got the smarts to be able to be that. And Nua Tully, to her credit, is a born politician, and she would have run rings around me. I would have been passionate about the cause and passionate about Newcastle. But I would have needed many others around me to be able to make it work. And yes, it could have worked, but no, I don't think I was Lord Mayoral material.
But do you know, Laurie McKenna, he's the mayor of the Central Coast now, and before that he was the mayor of Gosford, and obviously went into different roles, the Newcastle Jets. And to his own admission, he was a terrible mayor at the start.
Yeah.
He didn't even know. Like, I remember, I was actually on the Central Coast for NBN covering it, and first meeting gets on council. First meeting, they vote him as mayor. He didn't even know how to chair a meeting.
No,
they had a person sitting next to him. It was embarrassing. And as he said, it was embarrassing. I've got to learn how to do this. But he's got better and better and better, and he's a man of the people. You know that, and that's why I probably your ilk. Like, you would have been like the Laurie McKenna of Newcastle.
Yeah, nice of you to say that. Now, I was on the board of the Central Coast Academy of Sport with Laurie, and Laurie's a great bloke. And he went through that awful period of the merger, and then they went broke and were bailed out, and they had an administrator in for some time, and Laurie's come back. So he's a great bloke. And yeah, it could have worked, but again, there would have been, and there's a lot of good people in council, the employees of council. Not, they are a heart and soul. So you've got the bureaucrats, if you like, the councillors sit up there and rant and rave and take all the kudos, but the people actually in the head office, and why we ever abandoned that office to spend $29 million a year or whatever it is on rent the other building, that's another story. But yeah, it may have worked, but I'm probably pretty glad that it didn't.
Yeah, in regards to the councils, it was always Newcastle councils in the firing line. You don't hear as much with other councils, do you? It's always Newcastle.
The best time that this Newcastle council ever ran was when we did have an administrator in. And we had an administrator in for some time, and it was just absolutely fantastic. You never heard of anything. Everything was done. And I'm a bit... Okay, we've had some wet weather. There is no doubt about that. But you drive around not only Newcastle Council, but Lake Macquarie at the moment, and every verge is absolutely 6 foot high. So I don't know where all the mowers are. And admittedly, we've had some terrible weather. So, but it's looking a little bit tired. So I think, roads, rates and rubbish is what we should be concentrating on.
But even sporting facilities. I mean, I remember as a kid, I remember they always used to, in the summer, they'd always top dress. I don't see that anymore. You'd hit a beautiful cover drive and it would just go about 2 meters.
Well, in actual fact, I was only talking to Charlie Trail last night with a good mate of his, Adam, who were tied up with Hamilton Wickham. Well, the ground at Passmore has had a sand covering by the Hawks, Hamilton Hawks, sand covering over the cricket pitch, which is absolute sacrilege compared to, for these two gentlemen who are really into their cricket. So, the times have changed. But I think and that's another thing within council. You used to have ground committees that would look after the grounds. You would have ground managers who would report to council and say, look, Townsend Oval's unfit for play today or whatever the case. But I'm not 100% certain whether that's working smoothly at the moment either.
Yeah, I know there's a council down, I think it's down Sutherland Shire, Canada Bay, and the council spent a lot of money on synthetic grounds and nothing gets cancelled. A lot of outlay, but it's actually, saving the money in the long run.
I remember playing footy, Aussie rules in the southeast of South Australia. Nothing was in the winter.
Yeah.
And we had terrible weather. I wish they could add some rain down there at the moment.
The best value sport in Newcastle, I think, at the moment is hockey.
Yeah.
You drive past,
they water the place.
That's right. It's perfect for them. Can I talk about the 97 grand final? That again, it goes back to a live coverage, which would have been a lot of thinking on your feet. That would have blown your mind, even just the sea of people, that whole, you wouldn't have slept for 48 hours.
No, it was probably, a lot of people ask the question, what's the greatest thing you've worked on, or one of the great things you've worked on? And I always come back to the 97 parade. We had a 2-hour telecast and it was flying by the seat of your pants. We had a rough idea of what we were doing. Kerry Regan, the bear, was in the truck. Karen Scully was back in the studio directing things from the studio. And, we lived this moment for ever and ever and ever, the last 6 seconds. But I actually, going back before the parade, so we were thinking of doing a live cross from the Workers' Club. If they won, and they were all coming back to the Workers' Club, we were going to do a live cross. So they all came back to the Workers' Club, but we didn't do a live cross. So someone said, well, you're on the balcony, so get up on the balcony and here's the microphone and do so. Chief came up and picked up that Optus trophy, which in one hand, it weighed a ton.
I did, yeah.
So we did that. And then we went back into the auditorium and there were people there that had been there from the grand final. Now, remembering this was an old 3 o'clock in the afternoon grand final.
Yeah.
So 10:30 at night, how do you think they were travelling?
Bit weary.
Face on back to front.
Yeah.
So, and then we introduced the players one at a time from position.
And you'd probably be in the back of your mind knowing how crazy the Johns brothers are. They're going to come out naked or something here.
Well, kind of. So Matthew ends up in the crowd. He's crowd surfed into the crowd. So here they are coming back into the Workers' Club, Robbie O. So they had to... How the windows of the Workers' Club never caved in, I do not know. Our mascot, Rocky the horse, led the coach into the front of the building and then disappeared in the crowd. There's Joey.
And also did crowd control.
Did crowd control, then just disappeared, the chief. So we did that. And then we got prepared for Tuesday. So we went back and we said, okay, we're doing a live telecast from the top of the town hall. And we kind of put a rough schedule together. We knew it was going to start at Jasmine, and then come down Hunter Street, and then into King Street, and then so there's Jasmine. So this is the start of the parade. So, and of course their major sponsor was Stockland, so it was obviously a place to start.
Yeah.
Funny story here is that Dave Williams from Tooheys, he was the manager of Tooheys, and Tooheys were the major beer sponsor. When they actually got into King Street, and they were all in MGBs at that particular stage, sitting on the MGBs, here they are, they all had VB in their hands. So Dave Williams has got that bottle shop up at the top of Hunter Street, and so get those beers out of the hand and get a Tooheys into their hands. And at this stage, all the crowd's building at Civic Park. And Trevor Bush, our cameraman, there we go. Bishop Roger Herf, who I did say to him, we did
no swearing.
No. One Easter, and we'd have the Mike Malone, the bishop, Catholic bishop, and Roger Herford.
Michael Lane, yeah.
So I did say to him one time, I hope you've been to the Cop to buy your fish for the wreath. So he never forgave me for that one. So they are down in Hunter Street, and here's Rocky. One of the mascots and whatever the case. And there's Cliffy on the horse. It was just absolutely amazing. So the crowd in Civic Park are going ballistic. Trevor Bush is hanging out of a cherry picker with a boombox playing Tina Turner, Simply the Best. So he'd play a couple of bars and just turn it off. The whole crowd would take over. And here is, I think that's at this stage, that's a Tui.
Tui's dry, I think.
And
yep.
Tony Butterfield didn't actually go in he ended. There's Ray Deneen, rampaging Ray Deneen.
Oh, right.
Have a look at him.
Probably one of his cars.
Looks like an absolute fashion plate. So there's Ray was trying to do interviews.
He's got the Panama hat going.
Vanessa Spark was down at the entrance. The marching koalas.
Look at that.
It was just, and looking from the top of the town hall down on this was absolutely amazing. Now, up on the right, you can see the NBN watermark. Channel 9 actually rang up and said, get rid of the watermark. And we said, no, this is our telecast.
Yeah.
We're going to leave that. So that's there forever and a day. In the end, for their news coverage, they tried to cover it, which I thought was a bit of bad grace. Malcolm really, of course, the chief, and Malcolm's not in good health at the moment. And have a look at that crowd. So, and if everyone that says to you, I was there that day, that crowd's about 2 million.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So what we did here,
they're in the pond,
and so we said, well, okay, we got to introduce the players. So again, we introduced the players one at a time. Ladies and gentlemen, the fullback and Clive Churchill medalist Robbie O'Davis. So Robbie'd step up, and then we introduced everyone. Right at the end, Steve Crow came up and said, "You've got to introduce this young bloke." I said, "Who's this young bloke?" And he said, "Danny Badiris." I said, "But he wasn't part of this, was he?" He said, "He's the next big thing." So we introduced Danny Badiris. So he'd played reserve grade. Everyone knew who he was. But this bloke...
And went on to win a premiership.
Went on to win a premiership in 2001. But his speech and everything at the grand final and after was absolutely fantastic. Tony Butterfield was standing behind us and with us. He was in the coat and tie and a pair of tracksuit pants on. And he said, "Rabs, I've got him." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I haven't been to bed yet."
But things like this, I mean,
that's Newcastle.
It's incredible just to see. Speaking to old cameramen, and there was an old cameraman, and sadly passed away, Michael Rourke, beautiful man. I once asked him, I said, what's the best thing you've ever filmed? And he said, well, one was that. Two was the walkout at BHP.
Yeah.
And I said, "Wow, why is that?" He said, "I'm filming history."
Yeah.
So he said, the Knights, that was the very, you can't win it for the first time again.
No.
The BHP walkout, he knew he was filming something that was going to be there for eternity.
Yep.
Well after he's, on this earth.
Yeah.
Which is sadly what's happened. But it's an incredible, and even when I was at Channel 10, I used to say that to the younger cameramen. And they never thought it that way.
Yeah.
I said, sometimes you might be shooting mundane stuff, but it could someday be at the right place at the right time. You're filming something that...
Like Barry and the Star Rights.
Absolutely.
He was at home and got a call out and saying there's something happening down the Star. It goes out and that's become worldwide vision.
Yeah.
Johnny on the spot. Talking about Rocky actually turned up in a story that couldn't do the story because he didn't have his camera with him.
That's right.
Those are little stories. So, and a couple of people have backed over their cameras and whatever the case. But that shot at history, you can't repeat that. Now, a lot of people have said, what was 2001 like compared to 97? I said, nowhere near what you can do. But the BHP one was an interesting scenario because they had done such a great job. Now, in its heyday, I think there was about 16,000 people worked at the BHP. And I think there was just under 2,000, or maybe just over 2,000 at the end.
Everybody knew someone that worked there.
Absolutely, and here, and it wasn't a kind of a totally sad, somber occasion. Everyone knew it was coming.
Yeah,
and BHP had done a great job with the pathways to sustainability and trying to create pathways for employees to be re-employed in other areas or give them a new lease on life or a new industry or whatever the case. So, and Aubrey Brooks and everyone should be congratulated for the way that all happened. It was just absolutely extraordinary.
And the museum down here has a a great BHP, monument, and really worth it. You could spend, good 3 hours just going through that. Just with that, I mean, I think that was the thing, was that people thought that Newcastle was going to fall over when that happened.
Yeah, and I think that's what Chief made reference to in his speech on the ground in '97. He said, we've been through a bit of a tough time here with the earthquake and the BHP closure, and this is for you. And everyone reacted to that. It was absolutely fantastic. Yeah, some will say you only won half a comp because Super League was in there. But any time you beat Manly in any day of the week is a good thing. I don't know whether they're going to beat them this weekend, but, it was just, given the aspect of they hadn't beaten Manly for the previous 12 occasions, and then came out and a stroke of genius from one A. Johns, and it's in a blink of an eye, and Ray Warren with the great immortal words, Newcastle have won the grand final.
When I was in Sydney, I was down in Sydney working when Cronulla won in 2016, and I had that same feeling down the Shire. Not leading up to the week leading to it, it's almost like there was that feeling, like even before that grand final in '97, it's almost like we knew we were going to win. Yeah. It was like we were going to win. The same feeling was in the Shire. People were painting their houses black and blue, just like they were painting black, blue and red up here, and it happened, and it was almost like this incredible outpouring of just relief. Finally, ding dong, the witch is dead.
It was absolutely amazing, and to be a part of that was just absolutely incredible.
I want to talk to you about something. I don't know what made me think of it. I was going through, going past King Edward Park the other day. The hill climb.
Yeah.
How good was the hill climb?
Oh, the Hill to Harbour, or
like the
MG car club.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Some of the we got some
Matara Hill Climb.
I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah. Well, there was a cameraman at NBN, Stephen Jones. He was very much involved in that for many, many years. And Lisa Tobin was also involved in it for many, many years. But the Matara Hill Climb was a nationally recognised event.
It was almost like, people could just put together any contraption that had 4 wheels, and you're going up that mountain at the rate of knot. Yeah. No driving experience necessary.
None.
It was like, you're inches away from going over the top. Here we go. Look at this.
Best hill climb courses in Australia, and was the venue for round 1 of the 1972 Australian Hill Climb Championships.
The muscle cars. And you had some serious drivers would turn up and.
The tough, demanding course.
What's this? It's like a go-kart.
It's a skate park now, isn't it?
Yes. Let's not go down.
Wait on, that cliff's about to fall off.
Let's not go down that rabbit hole.
No, true. Craven Filter Corner, an awkward right.
Now there you go, Craven Filter Corner. They even had cigarette advertising in those days.
Look at this.
Normally used only by pedestrian traffic.
And this was still going on in 2013.
For a local driver who never quite made it.
The hay bale chicanes.
It's also been the downfall of scores of other hill climbers over the years.
Now that voice is the great Murray Finlay, who did a round Australia rally.
Wow.
And Jim Sullivan used to, who ended up being news editor, he raced this quite a few times.
Yeah, he loved his cars, Jim.
Yeah.
He was like the racing expert for a while, wasn't he? He was always doing.
He used to do the
it's like a half-an-hour show.
Yeah.
In that Nesca Park.
Yeah.
This weekend, the outright record for the climb was 47.166.
You could never do it. You couldn't get away with it these days. OH&S all over you.
I think they still have hill climbs at
Tomago?
Bulladilla, do they do some? Oh, Tomago?
Didn't they? Yeah, I think they had made a purpose-built track, but like just the seat, like you'd never get away with that. It's like the cheese rolling the other day
in England. Yeah,
but it's funny that cheese rolling. Remember, just up from down at the bottom where the bogey hole is, there's that hill. It looks like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like it's crazy. Imagine you trying to call this.
This is serious damage here,
mate. It is. And there was I think a women's race as well. Look at this. Try calling this, Rabs.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Cheese. And this is just the heat.
Serious injuries, and I'm a big fan of cheese, so
That looks like Granny Grief.
Some people did take the rolling a bit too literally, but it was Delaney from Canada who won the ladies' race with a thud. Despite getting knocked out, like most cheese rolling champions, it wasn't long before she was back on her feet. What do you remember of the race?
I was just going to say, just finally, with NBN, I mean, the sad thing about the move between Mosbry and Honeysuckle, a lot of stuff. There was so much stuff on tape.
Yeah.
And even when I was there at the time, I was saying to Yogi, Greg Sellers, at the time, I said, I walked downstairs and it was this library, and it was like all the grand finals of rugby league, local, all the rugby union, AFL. It was just everything. There was one time I pulled out a tape and Manchester United taking on Northern New South Wales.
Yeah.
And I said to him, you can get one of these back stations. Just play replays of this, like the Fox Sports did with old games, which you get transfixed to, don't you? Those old NRL games in the 80s. And you could sell ads around this.
Yeah.
People would just sit there and just watch it and just be
fixated on it.
Yeah.
And a lot of those would have been former players that played in those grand finals and whatever the case. And you would get at least one request a week. Oh, look, I played in the 1972 grand final, blah, blah, blah. You wouldn't have any footage, would you? But Phil Lloyd and Rhys Davis and a few others, thankfully, compiled a lot of that into digital. So,
and they still are over at the university too. I think Terry Bush and
they're still doing some work.
Glenn Cook.
Yeah,
they
still doing a great job. But there was a whole hunk of material from about all the stuff from about 1980 to 1986 was thrown out. So big rules and whatever the case.
They were saving, the Queen's visits and obviously BHP, all that sort of stuff. But it's
all the news stuff was saved.
Yeah,
but all of our outside broadcast stuff from about 80 to 86 kind of hit the bins.
Yeah.
Some of it was rescued.
Yep.
But a lot of it went.
Yeah.
Which is a real shame. You don't get that back.
It's funny, I just mentioned about the Fox Sports showing the old footy games. It was one time I was at home and I had it going. They just kept on playing game after game, and I had a day off, and I think I was doing the washing, which is rarity for me. And there was a game come on, it was Canterbury, and it was early 80s. I went, oh, wow, it's Neil Baker, Newcastle.
Saw him this morning.
And the game finished, came back with another load. South Sydney, Manly, Neil Baker. Wow, what's the chances of that? 2 in a row. Wouldn't believe it. Come to the next game, the Penrith game. Neil Baker.
1918. He kicks the goal from the sideline.
But three
was that
different
against
clubs.
Newcastle?
Yeah, but three different clubs in
Neil
three
Baker.
games in a row had Neil Baker in each game.
They scored about 960 odd points in his career, so he was a serious footballer.
Fair player for Hamwicks too, I think. Cricketer as well.
Yeah, so good bloke. He was on our commentary team. He was our sideline eye. And we had Richard Jones. So this is in the early days of the night. So we'd go away to Balmain and Campbelltown and everywhere to call the Knights games. So Bakes was sideline eye, and Richard Jones was up. Bakes used to say, well, you two are up there with your lame slippers on. It's all right. I'll handle all the wet weather. And we really struggled to get a few words out of Bakes every now and then. And so we'd call into the Pymble Hotel on the way back. So Jonesy and Bakes.
Great hotel.
Great hotel. We were on the first name basis in the end. So the driver, I was driving, so I was having lemon squash.
I think you've got a plaque there now.
So by the time we got to Mooney, Bakes, you couldn't shut him up. So he'd have a couple of depth charges and whatever the case, and he was on fire. But I saw him this morning, and he looks as fit as a fiddle, and he's a good bloke now.
Well, Rabs, it's been great having you on the podcast, and I hope to see you down the Green Roof sometime, or maybe a Merriweather Carlton game. You still go watch them?
Yeah, went on Anzac Day, actually. And that's one of the great things that I've enjoyed doing in the last few years is the Anzac Dawn service. I've really enjoyed being the host of that, and it's a real honour to do it. And this year we went, Merriweather Carlton and Wanderers, the two arch enemies, have a few years ago had a match, one of the matches on Anzac Day. So, and they swap around venues. So last year it was the number 2 sports ground. This year it was at Townsend Oval. So, and it's the biggest crowd of the year. It was huge. And we went along and it was a lovely day. So
not many people get the end of your sports report on a Friday because go down the barrel, go the Greens.
Well, the funny part about it, I always used to have a bet with the Hamilton crew on the University and the Wanderers. If you beat us in the grand final, I'll wear your tie. Now, there was about 3 or 4 years that we got close to winning the grand tie, but I had to wear the University tie, the Wanderers tie, and the Hamilton tie. So with a Wanderers
For the
tie,
Protestant and the Catholic.
absolutely, but with a Wanderers tie, and no one's picked it up. And I actually said it at the Newcastle club the other day when I was talking to the Hawthorn club. I had to wear the Wanderers tie, so I got the Wanderers tie on. But in the commercial, and this is when we had the 3 people finish at the end of the news. In the commercial break, I'd put the Mary with the Carlton tie back on. So no one picked it up. Not even our directors or anyone picked it up that I'd take that Wanderers tie off. But great rivalry and rugby, I think it's unfortunate we're down to about 6 teams. But the
I was actually surprised by that.
level of rugby is improving, I think. And the standard's been very, very good this year. So still there. So I can see you at the Green Reef on a Friday night, most Friday nights. And
Rabs, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Coney.
Keep being you. And I've got to catch a bus tomorrow. Can you pick me up?
Hardly a challenge. On the buzzer. I'll look after you, butler.
Hooroo.
Hooroo.
I'll get
you,
Blakey.
I'll get you, butler.
Blakey.
Blakey.